Okay, so let's talk about the initial approach and getting email introductions. First, let's establish where we're at. At this point, after getting the email addresses, stakeholder names, and companies that you want to potentially partner with, you should have your hit list filled out and ready to go. You should also know whether you're going to be taking the friendly company approach or the unfriendly company approach. Now, if we assume the latter, you have to bring some ordering to this big hit list that you just created. I highly suggest that the best thing you can do is group or order 5 to 15 companies that match that initial partner framework we talked about earlier. Again, the initial partner framework is about figuring out which company would make an ideal partner, or which 5 to 15 companies, taking into consideration the most important metric business development is trying to drive, who your ideal customer or user is and what their intent is, and then lastly, whether this partner is a good fit culturally as well as from a priority standpoint in terms of being a good first deal partner. Remember, you don't want to start with the kingfish unless it happens to be an easy win. And this is because first impressions are important, and oftentimes you only get one chance. So if you don't have the things like the case studies, like social proof of other partners, it's just going to be much harder to land. And if the meeting doesn't go well because you don't have these things, it might be difficult to get further meetings in the future. So let's take a look at how this looks in terms of selecting 5 to 15 companies on that big hit list you just created that are going to be the initial ones that you reach out to. What I honestly like to do is just denote this, because I'm old school and use a Google Doc, is just denote this by color coding. So right here, these are the first 6 partners that I'm going to go after. And the reason that I chose these is because they match my initial partner framework the best out of all the other ones. And I think that the color works really well because it just brings a focus to this hit list, which can eventually be hundreds of potential partners, and be a little overwhelming if you don't have something that's really kind of in your face, top of mind about where your focus needs to be. So what's the best way to attack these initial targets? In my experience, it's getting an email introduction. If you have a mutual connection with the stakeholder you're trying to reach, always try to leverage that relationship for an introduction or referral instead of going cold. And the reason is just because the personal context and being introduced from somebody they know and trust just results in a higher response rate. People are more likely to want to meet with you, more excited to meet with you when they do, and it generally just results in a much, much higher response rate in terms of getting meetings. So how do you approach this? How do you approach getting email introductions? For me, the workflow looks like this. First thing I do is I isolate the stakeholder on LinkedIn, and then I see if there are any warm second-degree connections. And you don't know if they're warm from the get-go, but what you're really looking for initially is just the connections and whether they exist. So it looks like an example here is if I wanted to connect with Joe Dolan, who I actually know, but let's just say I didn't. It looks like I have 3 friends here and 31 other people that might be able to introduce me. Now, just because 2 people are connected on LinkedIn doesn't necessarily mean they're close. There are tons of people that I'm connected with LinkedIn that honestly I have no relationship with at all. And for better or worse, I just decided that to accept their connections. So the ideal situation you're looking for is the warmest mutual connection between both of you. So your next steps at this point are to isolate your connection that you have the warmest relationship with and see if they have a warm relationship with the person that you're trying to get in touch with. And you can accomplish this by sending the following email. We're going to read through this, and this is called the request for introduction email, and then I'm going to break it down and explain each section so you understand exactly why this is so important. Let's just say my mutual connection's name is Peter and the stakeholder's name is Joe from Deutsche Bank. Hey Peter, I was looking to get introduced to Joe Dolan from Deutsche Bank and saw you were connected to him. I'm not sure how well you know him, but if the relationship is strong, I really appreciate an intro to chat about ways my company can help him with generating more revenue for his clients. Please let me know if you feel comfortable making the introduction, and I'll send over a note with some more context that you can simply forward to him to see if he's interested in connecting. Thanks. Okay, let's break this down. The first sentence is pretty much just context. Hey, I was looking to introduce you to this person from this company, so that's why I'm reaching out to you. And the reason that I'm asking you is because I saw that you were connected. The next section is about gauging the strength of the relationship. The last thing that you want is for somebody who doesn't have a strong relationship making an introduction for you. And people shouldn't do that anyways, but the best, most effective introductions are going to be from warm contacts. So you want to make sure that this person has a warm relationship. And if they have a warm relationship, usually they're more likely to make the intro. So to accomplish this understanding, you can say something like this. I'm not sure how well you know him, but if the relationship is strong, I'd really appreciate an introduction. Now, the next clause is about giving context to that introduction, because when people make an introduction, essentially what they're doing is they're offering up the other person's time. So you want to make sure that you're adding value, because the connector will only want to connect you if they perceive that there's going to be a mutual exchange of value. Otherwise, they're just, again, offering up somebody else's time, which, isn't necessarily a best business practice if there's not going to be a value exchange. So it's important to say something like, to chat about ways my company can help with however you add value. Again, you want to convey that this is going to be a connection that's going to make the person who's introducing you look good. Okay, last section. Please let me know if you'd feel comfortable making the introduction. And I'll send over a note with more context that you can simply forward to him to see if he's interested in connecting. This last section is about two things. A, making the ask and saying, please let me know if you feel comfortable making the introduction. And B, making it as easy as possible to see if the other side is interested in connecting. Typically, introductions should not be blind. Both sides should indicate that they want to connect before a connection is made. So what you want to do is just say, hey, I'm literally going to send you something that you can forward to them to see if they're interested. Because somebody might look at this and say, oh, great, now I have to conjure up a reason why this person would want to connect to this other person that looks like work. I'm not going to do it. If you want to optimize the compliance of this person agreeing to see if the other person's interested in connecting, the best thing you can do is make it as easy as possible by telling them that if the relationship is strong, you have a note that you can literally just send them that they can forward so they don't have to do any work. So this is a proper way to ask for an email introduction. And it's important that you do it this way because if you do it appropriately, there's going to be a higher likelihood that somebody is going to be willing to make the introduction for you. In addition, your business reputation is something that goes with you forever. If you come off as somebody that's not respectful, people are going to be less likely to want to do business for you, less likely to want to work with you in the future. So it's always just important to use best practices when you ask people for things like email introductions. Let's look at a bad request for introduction. And this is one that I got, I guess it was March 4th. Hey Scott, I hope this email finds you well. I'm hoping you can help me out and make a warm introduction to blank. I've been researching and was hoping so-and-so might be able to guide me in the right direction. Can you make me a warm introduction to Marcos so that I can have a quick conversation? So what's wrong with this? Well, A, I hope this email finds you well is just a phrase you should never use in email. This person emailed me on multiple email addresses, so you could say it's to Scott, to me. So they hit me up across email addresses, which is just kind of a little disrespectful. I'm hoping you can help me out and make a warm introduction. So I don't know what the difference between making an introduction and a warm introduction is. I guess they want me to talk highly about them. Generally, I would just avoid asking explicitly for a warm introduction. And they don't really tell me why this is going to be valuable to the party they're looking to connect with. All they said is they've been researching, and that I hope that I can guide them in the right direction, and that asking again if I can make it so they can have a conversation. I have no idea what you want to have a conversation with them about. Is it something that's going to be additive to his business? Is it something that he has no interest in? Every single time you make an introduction on behalf of somebody else, you're putting your business reputation on the line. So this is why it's so critical to do things like provide context, to ask in the right way, because quite frankly, I have no idea whether this is going to add value and make me look good to this guy Marco that he's looking to connect with. So this is what you don't want to do when you're making a request for introduction. And I actually don't think I made this introduction. Okay, so let's get back to the good email introduction. So after the request for introduction, if the person says, yeah, you know what, I do have a strong relationship, what happens next? Well, here's where you send a similar email to the person who's going to make the introduction, but with a greater emphasis on why the stakeholder should want to connect with you. It's essentially like a sales pitch, right? You want to make it as the opportunity to connect with you seem as attractive as possible in order to give yourself the best chance for this person to say yes. So this is what that email looks like. Hey, person who's making an introduction, I was hoping you might be able to introduce me to the stakeholder at the target company. I wanted to connect them because our email list targets a similar demographic with limited overlap. Seeing as our products are non-competitive, I wanted to touch base to see if there might be a way to provide mutual value to our respective audiences in a way that helps each other grow our lists. We did this with X company in the past, and both parties received a 15% lift in new subscribers. Any help is much appreciated. Now, the person who is receiving who is offering to make the introduction receives this email and simply forwards it over to the person that you are trying to connect with, and might say something like, any interest here? Do you notice a difference between this email and the request for introduction email? It's this middle paragraph here, which much more explicitly outlines why I want to connect with this person and the value that they will get from connecting with me. Again, it's almost like a sales pitch. You want to make it as attractive as possible. And one thing that I did in this email to make it even more attractive, to try to optimize the compliance on the target side, is reference another partner. Social proof is a powerful force, and nothing is more powerful and attractive to prospective partners than verifiable results which you can replicate for them. So after you send this email to your mutual connection, this is what to expect will happen next. One, you'll either get an introduction from the person who's connecting you guys. Two, you'll receive an email from the connector that the other person can't connect right now. Or number three, you won't hear anything back. Let's go through each one of these situations and discuss the appropriate way to handle them. If you end up getting an introduction, it's really important that you're the first one to respond and that you do it promptly. And the reason is that, remember, you were the one that was asking for their time. So you want to make sure that you seem appreciative for this favor and that you demonstrate that connecting to them is important to you. And again, being prompt is an effective way to do this. What happens if your mutual contact says that the other person can't connect? Well, in this situation, you want to make sure you understand why if the mutual contact doesn't explicitly state this. And when this person gets back to you and they give you a why, what you want to do is, if possible, try to disarm that why. So if they said, you know what, they're just not interested right now because they haven't seen a lot of return on their social media. That's just an example. You might reply to that with something like, hey, well, do you know that our original partners thought that as well, and then after working with us, they saw a 50% lift in subscribers after putting a greater focus on social media? So this is a good chance to try to put a rebuttal in there to disarm the fact that they don't want to connect. Or if it's something that seems like there's just no chance of the connection being made anytime soon, you want to move on. So if you get this response, why is it important to ask and or move on? Well, you want to ask because it allows you to get feedback. And this feedback from your prospect might be indicative of how you could improve or tighten up that forwardable intro request. Remember, that's like a sales pitch. And if it turns out that the reason that the person doesn't want to connect is just because you haven't communicated your value proposition effectively, this is excellent feedback that can allow you to tailor this and improve it for future partners. Also, the reason that you might want to move on is that your goal is just to spend time on working on things that are likely to close, or at least have a chance. If something's a flat out no, you're much better off just moving on, looking for a partner that is excited about working with you or that you have a chance to work with, instead of wasting time on deals that aren't going anywhere. Now, what happens if you don't hear anything? If your contact who offered to make the introduction never makes it or gets back to you, it's important that you follow up with them to see what's going on. A simple, hey, I just wanted to see if the prospect ever got back to you on this intro. Thanks again for doing this is really, really important, because sometimes people forget and they actually wanted to make the introduction. Sometimes it turns out that the prospect gave feedback that they don't want to connect and they just forgot to get back to you. Again, just getting context here is going to get you to a resolution that's either going to hopefully get you that introduction, or at least figure out why that introduction never happened. So again, always try to get an email introduction to open the door to a company if you can. And even if you can't get introduced to the exact person you need to, getting connected to someone at that company who's might even be in an adjacent apartment is still a very, very excellent thing to do when trying to get your foot into the door.